it's time. I'm ready to get back out on YouTube a little more often, so here I am. And my goal for this session and some future sessions like this is to basically do a music writing tutorial, because in my opinion, learning to write music is like the secret sauce of what especially every like intermediate guitar player is missing. I feel like, at least in my experience with guitar teachers and music teachers in general, there is not a huge emphasis on writing music. There's a huge emphasis on technique, and there's a huge emphasis on learning other people's songs. And then there's maybe, if you learn some music theory, it's sort of about analyzing other people's songs. And I basically just want to preach the gospel of learning to write music and having that be sort of like an intrinsically motivating system for you to just keep getting better at guitar and keep being excited about music. And so, yeah, that's my goal. What I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to write some music, do a little tutorial, explain what I'm doing here, and then I'll do a little pit stop to answer questions. And it looks like a lot of people are here, so welcome, thanks for being here. And feel free to fire off questions, and I will pop the chat out when it's the right time. So, first of all, when you start writing music, some really cool things happen. You start developing tools, you start understanding music theory better and better, and it makes you want to learn more. But if you've never written before, you've kind of got to have a starting point. So a lot of people talk about like learning scales, and what a lot of people don't realize is that when you're learning scales, you're kind of learning the basic blueprint to write music. So, and I'm not even talking about lyrics yet. I'm just talking about the music part of writing music. Lyrics are great and really important, but it's also okay to be someone who writes the music part of music. I'm part of a writing team. Me and my bandmate, we write together. I write a lot of the music, he writes a lot of the lyrics, but we also end up doing both. My band is called Hot Bodies in Motion, if you want to check us out, by the way. So let's get into a key here. Let's do the key of E minor. And I want to talk to you just on paper first, and then we'll pop over to the camera guitar over here in a minute, and I'll map this out on the camera guitar. But, so what we have to make a minor scale is whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. And if we start on E, we start by just putting the alphabet in. So E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. And then we go through and double check that all of these intervals are correct. And if you don't know what a whole step and a half step is, I'm really trying to start at the basics here, so I'll make this quick because I have a whole school about this stuff if you want to really understand it. But anytime you play a note on the guitar and you move one fret over, that's a half step. Anytime you play a note and you move 2 frets over, that's a whole step. So that's a half step, that's a half step, that's a whole step. This is all we're talking about when you're making scales. They're made of whole steps and half steps. So getting back here, if you don't know your musical alphabet, all you need to remember is that every note of the alphabet is a whole step away, except for B and C and E and F. And this is where we have our first problem here, because between E and F is a half step, and it should be a whole step. So what we do is we sharpen. And again, I'll show you on the camera guitar in a minute, but it's always nice to do it on paper first. So then we got whole step, F sharp to G is a half step because F to G is a whole step, so we're good. And then we got another whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. We're set. And again, I'll show this on the guitar too. Mux, there might be, there are quarter steps and fractional steps too, but in Western music, we tend to just use whole steps and half steps as the very basic sort of atoms. You could think of, in Western music, maybe quarter steps and fractional steps would be like quarks and things, but, or, electrons, but whole steps and half steps are like the basic atoms of Western music. So, sorry, I got to take a sip of coffee here. So one thing I like to do is I like to put it in, I like to put a scale in a circle. And, wow, that G was very distracted. There we go. Let's just make that look like an actual letter of the freaking alphabet. So when you put things into a scale like this, I mean into a circle, it sort of just shows the concept of like what a scale actually looks like. You're moving up this way and you're moving down if you go the other way. So the way that you get the chords in a key, because remember this is just a scale, and I said key of E minor. We're not in the key of E minor yet. We're just in a scale. So the way that you get the chords in a key is you just start on the first note and then you play every other note until you get 3 notes. So E, G, B, that is the 1 chord, the first chord in the key of E minor. If we start on F and we play every other note, we get what's called an F sharp diminished, which is F sharp, A, C. And diminished chords, we use a little Roman numeral with a little circle. And then we just keep going like this. We get G, B, D. Well, that is G, B, D. That is a major chord. And that is the third chord in the key. Roman numerals that are capital are major. Roman numerals that are lowercase are minor. But this is how we get all the chords in the key. And I want to show you this on the camera guitar. Before I get too far, let me just plug in the, there we go. So, whoa, let's see. Should be able to hear and everything. I think I'm going to come back to the iPad here. First, I'm just going to punch in the root note here. There's our E. And then we did whole, half, whole, whole, half. And then I'll just switch whole, whole. So we've got E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D. And the reason I like to think of it in a circle here, like I said before, is it doesn't matter what octave you're in. This circle just keeps going. Right? That circle just represents all the notes in the key. Doesn't really matter what they are. So now if we're trying to figure out the chords in the key, we start by just playing every other note starting on E. And if you'll notice, E, G, B, this is why when you play an E minor chord, it looks like this, is because you're grabbing every available E, G, and B in the vicinity. This is why this is also an E minor chord. That's why this is also an E minor chord. There's lots of different E minor chords you can play. The next chord in the key is an F sharp diminished, and it looks like this. There's some other ways to play it that we could talk about maybe in another lesson. Here's the G chord. That's the 3 chord in the key. If I play every other note starting on the 4th note of the scale, I get A minor. Every other note starting on the 5th note of the scale, I get B minor. Every other note starting on the 6th note of the scale, I get C major. And then every other note starting on the 7th note of the scale, I get a D major. Earth Star Sky says, bro, an octave is the same note as the root. Yes, by definition, any note an octave higher is the same note. Frequency-wise, what's cool about that is we tune our guitars to like A 440. And if you cut that, that's 440 hertz. If you cut that in half to 220, you get an octave. If you cut it in half again to 110, you get another octave, and so on. And so it's just like, yeah, frequencies are just, when you double a frequency, you get an octave. That's sort of the more like physical way to look at it. So what we have here is an E minor scale. And then we've got chords that are only using the green notes of the scale, and it just so happens that we get a chord for every note of the scale. So what do you do with this information? This is where things get kind of cool. Yeah, so actually this is a good question I want to pause and answer real quick, because this can be a confusing thing. So Choosy says, Where is the first position of the pentatonic scale positioned in relation to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? So the first position of the pentatonic scale positioned in relation to this, if you want to be in the key of E minor, then the first position, I don't remember the position numbers, I just know like the G-shaped pentatonic scale. But if you're talking about pentatonic scales, this would be right. So that's where the pentatonic scale is. But what I want to do is I want to write a little music, and then I want to use this system here. So I'm going to go back to my desk over here, back to the iPad, and let's see. I might just throw the chat on for a sec here because Muck said, no need to answer this now, but do you sing on Old Habits? Because, yeah, I don't sing the lead. That's my writing partner, Ben. He is the lead singer, but I did write a large portion of that song. So, ooh, we got so many good questions. I think I'm going to have to save all these good questions because I really want to focus on writing here. So we've got these chords, right? And what ends up happening is you can basically do a little cheat sheet. You can do a nice little memorization where you go, if you can make a scale, a minor scale, and then you can just memorize the order of chords, they're always going to be the same in every minor key because they're always made the same way. You're always making the chords in a key by playing every other note of the scale like that. And because whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, sorry, that's the minor scale formula. Whole, half, whole, half, whole. Because that's always the same formula for the minor key, that means you'll always end up with minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. So these are now the chords in the key of E minor. And we can kind of just plug them in, experiment, tinker. What I like to do in my writing practice is to just think of a very basic grid like this, and I like to practice just plugging in some chords. And if I put E minor here, let's see if I want to put A minor here. Let's do C here and D here. Let's see how that sounds. I'm going to just do 2 strums of each and then see where we go from here. So, let's see. Here's an E minor, A minor, C, D. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. I'm going to play around a little bit more, and then once I arrive at a progression I want to record, I will pause to answer some questions. I think that was cool. I want to try something else. I want to just see how this sounds. This is going to be E minor, G, A minor, B minor. Let's see. That's kind of nice. So something really cool, this is your first sort of songwriting tool to think about, and that is repeat with changes. Because what makes music so interesting to people when they listen to it is if your brain goes, I think I might know what's going to come next, or I have no idea what's going to come next. And if you take a progression that you've recorded and then you repeat it and you make changes, to just some part of it, that can be really cool. And I think what I might do, I think what I'm going to like the sound of here is actually, I'm going to set this first pass to go A minor, and then I'm going to set the second pass to go A minor, B minor. And if you listen to this, tell me if you think that this sounds like cohesive. When all I did was, I did repetition with changes. So check this out. We got... Right? That's starting to feel like something. You see what I mean? So this, I think, is a good point to record. So I like it, and it's such an easy trick to just repeat with changes. Suddenly, it makes it feel very deliberate, and you want your music to sound deliberate because, you know, imagine telling a story. And instead of developing a character, you just switch to a different character, and then you just switch to a different character infinitely throughout the story, and there's no resolve, there's no going back to previous characters, you never know what happens to anyone, or if they learn anything, or if they get better, or if they get worse. You know, repetition with changes is sort of like, here's that same character, here's something that happened to that character. And to me, this is why this trick is so potent, powerful. So let's see, I am going to pause for a few minutes for questions, and I'm gonna see what we have here, and then I'm gonna come back and record what I have. So let's see. Oh, cool. I think I answered most of those questions, but Make Things Happen says, where'd you go? There you are. Is the pentatonic scale a slimmed down version of the caged pattern? I think it's a little backwards from that, actually. Let's answer that question first. So, and I mean, you're probably here because you've seen my video on the caged system. And honestly, if I had known that that was going to get, 12 million views at this point, I probably would have spent a little more time on it, but I think I had like 20 subscribers when I put up that video, so I had no idea it was going to get that big. So let's talk about just what the caged system is, first of all. It is, the caged system is basically the claim that there are only 5 possible chord shapes on the guitar, and any other shape that seems like it's not one of those shapes is just a version of one of those shapes. So the C shape, the A shape, the G shape, the E shape, and the D shape. On top of that, the caged system says that these chord shapes will always be in the same order all over the whole fingerboard. So obviously we can play a C chord here in blue, and remember, what makes a C chord is these blue notes. That's it. A C chord is just C, E, and G by definition. Doesn't matter which C, which E, which G. If you're playing C, E, and G, you're playing a C chord. So on guitar, we talk about chord shapes. What does it look like? What's the fingering like? What, right? So this chord shape, you can see that's obviously out of tune a little bit. This is obviously a C chord. This is an A-shaped chord, meaning if you were to capo right here on this C root note that shares with this C chord, if you were to capo right there and just play an A chord, it would actually be a C chord. And then, so that's the CA of caged. And then if we scoot up here, if you were to put a capo where you're currently playing the fingers for that A chord, if you were to put a capo there, you'd be able to play a G-shaped chord that would still be a C chord, right? And if you were to capo where this finger was on the G chord, you could play an E-shaped chord, right? You would to you, it would just be an E chord, but because you've capoed up here, you're actually grabbing C, E, and G, which means you're playing a C chord. And if you were to capo right here, where these fingers are of your E chord, if you were to capo there and play a D chord, you'd be playing another C chord. And then you'd be back to that same shape of the C shape. So the caged system has nothing to do with cages. You're not locked in a cage. It's really just saying C, A, G, E, and D are the only possible major triad shapes out there. And anything you grab is going to be just part of that shape. And I have, if I may, I have Caged Basics 1 and 2 are courses that I've really spent a lot of time on my Patreon to help you understand how to recognize these shapes, how they fit together, how to play around with them. And I'm really proud of that course. Check it out. I've got a link in the description. But you were asking, is the caged system just a slimmed down version of, is the pentatonic scale a slimmed down version of the caged pattern? And I would say, instead of saying that, I would say it's actually adding more to the basic caged system, because a triad, C, E, G, this is the root, third, and fifth of a C major scale. And so if we were to punch a whole C, D, E, F, G, A, B, right? If we were to put a whole C major scale here, well, there's a C major scale you could play in each position, right? And if we go to this A shape here, right? If we go to the G shape here, this is not really a chord you gotta ever actually play, but I'm just doing it for demonstration, right? That's just a major scale. And it turns out that the pentatonic scale is really more like a slimmed down major scale, because if I add the two missing notes of the pentatonic scale here, I'm gonna turn this blue triad into a pentatonic scale by adding the second note of the scale, the major scale, and the sixth note of the major scale. So this is now, here, I'll keep that C in there with pink here. So here we've got a C chord in pink, and then pink plus blue is pentatonic, and then plus green is the major scale. The way that I like to think about the relationship between a triad and a pentatonic scale and a major scale is, everything in music theory is based on the major scale, or the minor scale. They're basically the same thing, but when we're talking about chord progressions, like someone was talking about, 1, 4, 5, the Roman numerals, those are all based on major and minor scales, not pentatonic scales. But we use pentatonic scales partly, I would say, because we have been for a long time, and partly because they are like the most neutral sounding notes in the scale. You're basically removing any half steps from the scale, and also removing sort of notes that could be perceived as dissonant to some extent. There's way more complexity to it than that. I'm just trying to say it simply, but learning the pentatonic scales first is really cool, though, too, because a lot of music tends to be modal. So sometimes a song that's in a major key might actually be using like Mixolydian, and very often songs in a minor key will be using sort of Dorian mode. And if you use a pentatonic scale instead of a full major or minor scale, all you really need to do is add more notes to the pentatonic scale rather than change any notes. You just have to add notes to convert it to major, minor, Dorian, Mixolydian, Phrygian, Lydian, that kind of thing. Anyhow, I feel like I probably just made things more confusing for you, make things happen, but hopefully this gives you sort of a sense of like the scale. The green notes, all the notes you see here basically are from the major scale. the green ones are the ones that are missing from the pentatonic scale, and then the blue notes are the notes that are missing from the pink triad, essentially. So the caged system starts with triads, and then you can add, right? And then you can add notes to that triad to make it pentatonic, and then, you know, add notes to make it major or minor, and then you can also add notes outside that, but that the pentatonic scale works as like a scaffolding, in my opinion. It's like the framework that everything kind of fits in. And there's more to it as well, but that's the gist. So I'm gonna answer another question or two here, and then I'm gonna, let's see. Yeah, okay, so one more question from someone. Let's see. Do you look at this key of E minor being the 6 of G major, or do you look at it in its minor context? So I will always acknowledge that a major key and its relative minor are essentially the same thing. For example, I didn't even put a root note on this C, but this is a C major, right? This is a C major pentatonic scale, and at least that pink triad is a C major chord. But if I were to get rid of that root note, and let's see, where am I going? Get rid of that root note and get rid of the pink notes, and then instead of C, E, and G, I do C, E, and A. That's an A minor chord, and then I put my A root note here. Well, this is literally all the same notes, all the same green notes, all the same blue notes, but this is now the relative minor chord. And so the key of C and the key of A minor, they share all the same notes, they share all the same chords. Logically, they have to, because, sorry, I can't think and play at the same time apparently, but they have to share all the same notes because they're made from the same scale system. An A minor scale and a C major scale share all the same notes, and it means they share all the same chords. It's just in the key of A minor, we say this is the 1 chord, and in the key of C major, we say C major is the 1 chord. That's about it. So let's, might have to talk about modes later. I think what I'd like to do now is let's make some music with the chord progression that we did before. So one of the most fun ways to make music, in my opinion, is to use recording software. And all you got to get is, you don't even have to get one of these, it just makes it extra fun. This is a, here I can show you the exact model if you want. It is the Akai Professional LPK 25. LPK 25. It's a great thing here. And so what I like to do is I like to pop into recording software here. I like Logic Pro. This is my sort of preferred software. And then I will try to figure out, there we go. I'll just grab an empty software instrument, and then I'll go over into this drawer over here and I'll find a drum kit. That's got a good kick drum. Right? So what I'm doing, in case you're like, what the heck's going on here? What a lot of people don't realize is that this isn't a keyboard. Keyboards tend to have built-in sounds. This is what's called a MIDI controller. It has no built-in sounds. It just plugs in via USB to my computer, and then I can pick whatever sounds I want. So currently it's drums. right? So what I want to do here, hi, by the way, welcome everybody, nice to see you. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to find a tempo, maybe just a random tempo. I'm going to listen. That's a nice tempo. Maybe I want 96. And I'm going to turn the drums way down so I can hear this click really, really well. Yeah. Also, I'm showing you all the shortcuts that I use. Space, play, return, sends it back to the beginning. Now I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to go. I like that. I was rushing a little bit. I'm going to hit Q to quantize because I don't need to be a perfectionist about my timing with this. I'm just basically creating a fancy metronome. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. So let's see. We do have a question here. Chimmy says, how do you get the guitar sound into Logic Pro? So you use something called an audio interface. You can find really cheap ones, well, relatively cheap, for like $100. The one I'm using is just out of camera view. You could almost see it here, but it's yeah, Chimmy said you need an audio face like a Scarlett 2i2. Exactly. An audio interface is basically a device that plugs into your computer via USB, and it also plugs microphones and guitar instrument cables into the front, and it basically converts that analog signal into a digital signal so that your computer can read it. And we'll do that actually right now. One of the coolest things about recording software is that you can record the basic dry sound of your guitar, and then you can tinker with the settings later. So I'm gonna just put this on here. So what I mean by that, let's go in here. Also on my last video, a few people thought it was kind of gross that I sometimes lick my finger before I hold the pick, but I've been doing it for too long, and I will probably never stop. Jimmy says, and can an amp output go into a Scarlett? Only certain amps, not I would say a tube amp, I would not risk it. But here is just the raw sound of my guitar into the software. And I think it's a little loud actually. Turn the gain down. I should add here, just because this is what I do for a living, I have a lesson on my Patreon, a series on my Patreon about just getting started with GarageBand, which is kind of like the baby brother of Logic Pro. And it talks about things like gain settings, like what it even means to like get a, like, how do you get a good sound? What does that mean? How do you capture that? I walk through all of this stuff, and it's pretty fun. A lot of people have really liked that course. So let's talk about just the raw sound of the guitar. And I just want to quickly remember here, I was doing E minor, G, A minor, A minor. I haven't quite decided how much of each I want to do. I forgot how this would go with my beat, so we're just going to explore, and maybe I'll end up changing it a little bit. So that is the sound of my raw guitar. So let's put it through an amp. Here's this amp. I don't know if I like this amp right now, but let's see. Right, you can mess with it a lot. It's kind of cool. I can also switch to a different amp here. I don't have to commit. Logic's kind of fun because you can pick different microphones. Totally unnecessary, but really fun. So I want So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to EQ a little bit. And it's a little bright. I'm going to EQ. And I'm going to throw a little limiter on there just to see. I almost want to throw it on before the amp, but I'm going to see how it sounds after the amp. If you don't know what I'm doing, that's okay. This is sort of fancy stuff. Jimmy asks a really good question. Can any normal laptop handle Logic Pro? It really depends on how much you're doing with it. I would say for learning how to use it, absolutely. Once you start So I like that. So what I ended up doing instead of exactly what's on my iPad here is I ended up doing a full measure of E minor, a full measure of G, and then 2 full measures of A minor. So basically we've got 1, 2, 3, E minor, 1, 2, 3, this is G minor, and then, oh yes, Chimmy, it is only for Apple. There's also, if you're a non-Apple user, which is understandable, there's software called Reaper that is pretty affordable. I think it's like $60, and that's definitely a great software to practice. Yeah, Reaper is what you're looking for, Chimmy. There's also tons of people, if anyone here uses recording software for, Microsoft, everyone's got their own preferences. I think some people use FL Studios. There is, of course, the gold standard Pro Tools, which is very expensive, but I think they make a light version that helps you get used to it, kind of like GarageBand. But Reaper is a great start. Try Reaper. So I think I'm going to record this whole progression here, and I like showing the software, but I think I'm going to show, oh, I forgot, I have a cool trick I can do. I'm going to do a couple takes of this, and I'll just leave the chat on while I'm doing this because I'm going to spend just a few minutes trying to get this down, and I think I have a fun, like, green screen way to do it. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, I think I got it. It's a little sloppy, but my goal here, my goal is not to be a perfectionist at all. My goal is just to write something. And when you are learning how to write, your goal should be to just write something. Don't overthink it. Just get into a groove. Just practice making something frequently. And so this, I could probably record this 10 more times and do it better, but we're just writing something. So maybe what I want to do now is I'm going to throw a bass line down on it, and then I'll stop and do more questions, if that sounds good. So, I don't know if this is in tune. We'll find out. I'm gonna do a new audio track, and just so you know, I've been having a little buzzing with my stuff. A little background buzz with my stuff going on lately, and I still have to kind of figure out what's going on with it. But in the meantime, let's see here. I'm gonna throw a basic bass amp kind of tone on here, and let's do classic, and I'm just going to turn some treble down so we don't have as much of that. That's a fun tone. And then I like to record with a little compression, so I'm going to do that. And if you don't know what compression is, it's a pretty cool thing. It's, let's see here. Compression basically, oh, I see what I did wrong here. We got this one. Pause. We got some important questions that just came up. I'm going to roll my volume down so we don't have any noise here. So, couple of important questions here. One is, Day says, "Hey, I'm a drummer, but I want to learn guitar. So which one of your videos would you suggest I start with?" And then someone else answered for me really effectively. Elusive Electron said, "Start with learning how to tune a guitar, play chord shapes, play along to a chord chart. You can take the same chords up and down the neck to play different notes." That's a great starting point. I would say there is so much beginner stuff out there, Day, that my content is really for people who, once you get going and learn the basics, where do you go from here? And I especially focus on creativity. If you want to write music, if you want to make your own music, come check out my school, come check out my channel. I have this philosophy that is that learning guitar is all about if-then. There's if you want to be good at a certain thing, then you want to do a certain thing. There's no really right way to learn guitar. You got to have a goal first. You got to decide what you want to do with guitar, what's fun, what's exciting to you. And from there, then what to do becomes more and more obvious. So that's my school, and my content online is all about helping you get to know how music theory connects to the fingerboard, and then how to actually use that to make something. And that's my goal. That's what I want to do. If you've got a computer and you don't know what to do with it, my GarageBand course will still be really helpful over on Patreon, even if you don't use GarageBand. It's just kind of going through the basic stuff. Nathan says, "How do you write bass lines to your progressions?" So, I would say this is a perfect segue actually into writing bass lines. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pop over to the camera guitar for a second and talk about how to write bass lines. Because it isn't super intuitive, but then once someone talks to you about it, it starts making more and more sense. So, writing bass lines. Now that we know that we're in the key of E minor, which is right here, right? And we've got a chord progression. And that chord progression starts with an E minor chord. So when I'm playing bass and I'm thinking about what can I play over an E minor chord, I have sort of like the safest notes I can play, which is the root note and the fifth of the chord. So when I'm playing an E minor chord on guitar, the safest notes I can play as a bass player is the root and the fifth. The second safest note I can play on the bass, you'd think would be the third of the chord, but in my opinion, on minor chords, the second safest note to play is the 7 of the chord. So if I'm playing E minor, which I was playing an E minor 7 anyway, but as a bass player, if someone's playing a triad, you can still play a minor 7. So then I'm playing a G major chord, and over major chords, I like to think of it as the safest notes I can play over a major chord, which in this case is G, B, and D. Oh, sorry, wrong buttons. G, B, D. The safest notes I can play are also going to be root and fifth. So if I'm playing, safest notes are right, and for major chords, instead of thinking about 7 being the other safe note to play, it's actually, in my opinion, it's the 6 of the chord, which would be E. And you can hear this in a lot of like Motown. Right? Or, let me scoot up to the neck so you can see. Well, I can play it here. So those are like my foundational basic pieces, but there's more to it. I also have tons of lessons about this stuff on my Patreon. I've got melody writing lessons, and basically all of bass playing is melody writing specialized for bass. But if you learn how to write melodies, writing bass lines makes a lot more sense. Anyhow, let's see if I can write something using what I just talked about here. So first of all, let me make sure that the mix is nice on this thing. And then I'm going to go back into just maybe my little green screen mode. And again, sorry about that buzz. I'm still trying to track it down. I'm going to do a quick sound check here. That sounds fine. My gain is a little bit low, but let me see if that actually helps with the buzzing. It's going to make the buzz about the same, but hang on a sec, let me see if I can fix some of that buzz a little bit here. What do we have? I see, I turned the gain up too much. Yeah, it's about the same. That's okay. So, let's get this going here. Where's my da-da-da-da? And then my compressor here. All right, so let's just get some, I'll get some takes going. I'm gonna scoot over to green screen mode and boom. I'm not matching my kick at all. I want to match my kick. So here's my problem right now. I don't like my drums, but I like my bass. I'm gonna go. Okay, this is kind of fun. I'll explain myself a little better in a minute, but I kind of want to just get a nice little take. Here we go. That'll do it. Let's see. So here's what I don't like. The bass line I came up with, I'm enjoying, but it doesn't go well with the drums. And part of why it doesn't go well with the drums is that the drums So what I want to do actually is I want to re-record the drums here and have it match what the bass is doing a little bit. This is also kind of how, what am I trying to say? This is kind of what it looks like to write music sometimes, is you come up with something you like, and then you like that new part you came up with more than your other part. Yeah. Let's see if we can do this better. And I don't need to be perfect, but okay. So that's let's see. I liked the second half I played. That's better. Let's see. So now, let me just kind of get everything mixed a little better. Make these drums feel a little bigger. All right, that's a little starting point. And I guess what I think about when I think about a little writing session, how you can get started writing music is to say, oh, I came up with a little thing. I don't need to finish this. I don't need to take it all the way to the end. I just need to practice writing little things like that. And once you get like 10 or 15 of those, there's going to be one that you really like, and then you're going to go, okay, I'm going to actually try to turn this one into a song. I don't know how to do that yet, but I'm going to work on it. And then maybe once you have like 100 little random things you've made, you'll have taken 10 or 15 of those, or maybe 20, and sort of tried really hard to like form them into something that becomes a song. And then of those 20, 15 or 20, maybe 3 to 5, you're like, oh, this is actually forming into like a real song. And to me, this is what all the good songwriters I know do, is they just get into a groove of like, let's just write something. Let's try to make something happen. Let's just see how it goes. Yeah, so, okay, I'm going to go back into some questions here and see what's going on. I missed a few because I was just trying to get some stuff right and trying to show you what's going on. So, let's see. Let's see. Someone says, okay, yeah, Day, we were talking about writing earlier, and Day says, okay, I understand. I might write at some point, but I'm really trying to learn so I can start being as comfortable with guitar gigs as I am with drum gigs. Yeah, that's fair, and if you have a really specific goal like that, to get comfortable with guitar, playing gigs, playing certain kind of music, that's a really great specific goal. For people who want to like just intrinsically get joy out of guitar, like learning to write is just immensely useful. If you want to learn how to solo, my channel and my Patreon especially would be really beneficial for you, I think. Yeah, the truth about my guitar right now is I just, my main guitar is at my my rehearsal space, and this one, it's got a little bit of a buzz. I see what you're saying. No, the buzz in the software is from a ground issue that I got to figure out with this room, and it takes a lot of equipment to do this sort of a setup like this, and so there's probably just some electronic equipment that's interacting with something else in a way, and I just haven't figured it out yet. But yeah, I have this guitar still does need a little bit of work though too. I gotta actually sand down a fret that's buzzing right now. That's what I thought you were talking about. Purple Pieman says, hey SPJ, your Patreon lessons have really opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially your caged series. Will you be expanding on other shapes aside from the C shape in your caged soloing series? Yeah, that's on the list. I think going through each caged sort of set of chords, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, that's kind of how that system worked. If I remember correctly, I think I also did it the other way around, where I just did a whole series on like a 1-2 progression in the C shape, in the A shape, in the G shape, E shape, and so on. And I think that method might be better. But I'm also, now that I'm finishing up this really big series I've been working on called Music Theory for Guitar 2, that talks about chords in a key and how harmonic and melodic minor and secondary dominants all create this set of chords that are the most common chords you're going to find with songs on the radio, basically. Now that series is coming to an end, I'm going to... I have a lot of series I'm weighing, and the caged soloing stuff, I think I'd like to do some sort of more conceptual overview lessons about it, so that people who can get the general idea from that C-shaped series and from the other series that I did, they can see the context and sort of understand how to get the work done and how to view things. But yeah, it's a cool thing. Essentially, what I was talking about earlier was that the caged system sort of, who was asking? Someone was asking about, is the pentatonic scale a slimmed down version of the caged system? And I said, no, the pentatonic scale is a slimmed down version of the major or minor scale, and then the caged system is just based on triads, but they all kind of stack on top of each other really neatly. And the cool thing about the chords in a key, if you're trying to solo in a caged position, is just like the logic of you know, whole, whole, half, whole, whole, or whole, half, whole, half, whole, right? The minor scale formula, because that always gives you the same set of chords, major, minor, major, minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major, right? All these chords here that I'm talking about. Minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. And this is the minor scale formula, right? Because that formula always creates the same set of chords, that also means that when you're in any caged position and you know what the one chord shape looks like, which it's going to look like an A shape, if you're in the A shape position, right? Then that means the 4-chord shape will always be a D shape. And it's that kind of if this, then always this logic that is so beautiful about the guitar, that it makes thinking about a key almost more about like, what is the shape of this key in this position? And that's, you know, after those 2 courses where I really went really granular, I'm still working on the language to talk about ways of a much more of an overview lesson that can help things snap into place from a much more broad view. But good question. Thank you. Alex Jenkins loves the green screen. Thanks. That's really fun. Let's see. Basil says, hey, Basil, just a quick question. Wait, where did that go? Just a quick question. What do you mean by it follows the kick drum? Just one of those things that I don't really understand. So what I mean is, let's go in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my drum set here. And actually, I'll make a copy of it. Oops, wrong button. There we go. I'm going to Command D. I'm going to Option drag. I'm going to mute this one. And then I'm going to go in here. I'm going to delete everything that isn't the kick drum. And it's funny that you asked because I still didn't write a kick drum part that perfectly follows the bass. But let's back up for a second. The kick drum and the bass guitar, right? This guy over here, the bass guitar, the 4-string or sometimes 5-string beefy boy. The kick drum takes up maybe slightly lower frequencies than the bass, but they kind of take up the same frequency zone. And so I don't know, I have to explain this if I can just show it to you. Hang on a sec. Here we go. So because let me just solo the kick drum here. So this takes up these big, beefy, low frequencies. This is kind of in like the subwoofery range. And the bass guitar doesn't quite go as low, but they overlap right around here. So the idea is if you have a kick drum pattern that mostly lands when the bass lands, and again, like I said, I didn't do a very good job because I was trying to be quick, but I'd probably spend more time ironing that out. But you see how they line up often. But not all the time. If I wanted to make them match even better, I might do a little something like this here. Let's see. You know, something like this. So now I've got those kicks, you know, not exactly because I played something different the second pass, but if we're just focused on this first pass, getting those kicks to be like really perfectly aligned with the drums. It's, how do I put this? If you talk to like a pro, they'll be like, oh, it's overkill to do that, but it's good to practice doing that. Because the idea with learning bass is just building an awareness right? And so those kicks, those kick drums are kind of hitting with the bass. And what I was playing before was like really not, it was as if the drummer couldn't hear what the bass player was doing. And it was something like, which is also cool, but it's not lining up. And there's no right or wrong way. Sometimes there's ways to play kicks off from the bass that sounds really cool, but there's ways to do it that sound not very deliberate, and what I was playing before just didn't sound very deliberate in my opinion. So I adjusted it. Yeah. So let's see, I'm gonna do a couple more questions and then I may just call it a day. Let's see. So, Nathan said, is that finger drummed SPJ? I'm wondering if GarageBand has the same capabilities. Yes, GarageBand absolutely has the same capabilities. There's in Logic Pro, you can click a region and then you can hit Q and it will actually snap everything to the grid so that you don't have to play it perfectly. But GarageBand, absolutely, you can plug in a MIDI controller just like this one, and pick a sound that you want, and you can play it. The thing about GarageBand is I think you have to click into this little editor window, and then you have to select them all, and then you quantize in here. And again, I don't consider it cheating to use quantization because I'm not here to be the perfect finger drummer. I'm just trying to create a nice, interesting metronome for me to play along with, essentially. And sometimes if I like a beat enough, I'll keep tinkering with it, or I'll start by making a really cool, funky beat that I really like. But most of the time, I just want to make something quick and vaguely interesting to write a bass line and a guitar line over. Sometimes I'll write vocals if it feels right. Doesn't often, well, it does often. Oh, thanks for the money. I appreciate that. Let me go back to that question. So Purple says, hey, Scott, when you are writing progressions on the guitar, do you tend to use the 3-note chords most of the time or the bigger 4, 5, 6 string chords? Which chords do you use in the final mix? That is an awesome question because the guitar takes up some surprisingly low frequencies, and they do kind of interact with a bass player. Oh, that's right, I'm not like plugged in at all, but there's the problem right there. Nothing. Essentially, the thing I was talking about with the kick drum and the bass, where the kick is usually a little bit lower frequency than the bass, but they take up enough overlapping frequency that you want to consider how they're interacting. An electric guitar, especially those low 2 strings, they are kind of approaching bass guitar territory, and so I will frequently avoid playing those strings unless there's a really big, beefy, loud section of a song. And even when I'm, okay, I will plug in, because even when I'm playing like a full rhythm guitar part, let me show you what I'm talking about here. So even when I'm playing like a full-blown rhythm guitar part and it looks like it looks like I'm strumming all the strings because I'm holding all the strings, but I'm actually aiming for the top 4, maybe that 5th string, but usually top 4. And if you listen to the difference in sound, it's really incredible between this listening to that between trying to strum all the strings, it sounds like this. And those low frequencies, they can make things muddy. They can make things thicker, which if you want things to be thicker and fuller, you can, but they also take away detail from maybe if you're, adding cool little sus chords or something. And it also just kind of gets in the way of the bass. So if you want the guitar to feel on its own separate, playing fewer strings and turning your volume up can actually make you mix better than just trying to play louder. Good question. Really fun question. It depends on the situation, but I will say if you're watching me play live with my band, I'm usually pretty careful about when I'm hitting those low strings in a chord progression, and most of my rhythm parts in Hot Bodies in Motion are designed around just playing top 3 or top 4 strings. And to me, it almost makes the guitar part feel more deliberate because you can really choose the voicings you want to play. It's kind of nice. Let's see. So Searching for Pixels says, I learned guitar as a teenager, mostly learning a few songs from tabs. Where is the best place for me to start getting better at the fundamentals, scales, chords? I mean, if you join my Patreon, it's an online school for learning how music theory and guitar go together, and then how to use that to actually like make music or to understand what's going on. My big goals are focusing on musicianship. And to me, musicianship basically is not just understanding music theory, but being able to use it in real time with other people. So one of my favorite things to do is if someone wants to jam with me, I'll just say, you play something you're comfortable playing, and then I'll play along with you. And I can figure out what chords they're playing. I can turn them into fancier chords or simpler chords, or I can make a bass line or a riff that kind of goes with them, or I can play fills. And that to me that's musicianship, when you can sit down and just play with another player you've never played with before. I also focus really heavily on writing music, which is sort of the foundation of being able to do that kind of thing. Is how do I write a rhythm part that's interesting? How do I write a riff? How do I write a bass line? How do I write a melody? And the more you get the hang of doing that kind of stuff, first of all, the more fun you have playing music, period. But also, the better you get at sort of spontaneously playing with other people. And here's the really cool thing. For those of you that want to learn how to figure out songs by ear, learning to write music is like constantly using the raw materials people use to make songs. And so the better you get at writing music, the better you start going, oh, I love the sound of a 1/4 progression in a minor key, or in Dorian, or in a major key, right? And you start recognizing the sound of different chord progressions because you're messing around with them so often and you're using their names, which is very important. The difference in music theory and just someone kind of having a good ear but not knowing what they're doing is having names for things. And when you have names for things, they get so much easier to think about. So good question. Thanks for asking. Let's see. Tanuk says, your teaching style gave me the ability to move away from just using the standard upper parts of the guitar neck. Awesome. You're welcome. Indical71 says, Scott, if you could only have one guitar amp, what would it be? I mean, it's funny that you say that because I essentially only had one guitar amp from probably the past 15, I would say of the past 20 years, I probably only had one. And I did so many gigs with the Blues Junior, and I love it. And I've been experimenting lately with a PV Special 130 from I think the late 80s. I don't have it in my studio right now because I've been gigging with it, but it's great for the clean, funky rhythm guitar I like to play with Hot Bodies, and it's a great pedal platform because it has a lot of overhead. But the thing is, Indical, is my gear drive is always goal-based. It's always like, what do I want to use this gear for? Of course, there's gear every once in a while that I just want it because it looks cool. But most of the time, I'm thinking about what gear is going to help me do what I'm already doing. What's going to make my life easier, more efficient, simpler, or effortless? And that's usually how I think about gear. almost rarely do I think about resale value, which is probably not a financially smart decision, but whatever. Yeah. Someone asked, Tong Kung, what software is used to create graphics in the live video streaming? I really want to use this method for teaching in Thailand. I came up with this guitar software. Me and my video editor have been slowly refining it over the past 5 years or so. And I started out with the Cage System video and a few others, just making by hand, painstakingly putting each dot on there. And I realized if I want to keep making that kind of video, I should probably come up with a system for it. And so I did. And so, yeah, that camera guitar thing is my own thing. Let's see. Jimmy says, my earlier question was a chords in a key question, but asking where a single pentatonic position G shape is on the fret for each of the chords. Yes, I see what you're saying. So there's one pentatonic position. This is my school of thought. There's one pentatonic position for each shape. So think about this. If we're in the key of E minor here. So let me make this map a little simpler here. We'll take, we'll put this E back in here in blue, right? So this is an E minor pentatonic scale, what I would call the C shape position, because C shape, A minor shape, it's just like, it's all based on this one. Relative minor is A minor, so an A minor shaped E minor. And here's the thing, that's the pentatonic shape, but underneath it is just the scale, which would be E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, right? So if I were to play a chord progression, I can stay in this position because in the key of A minor, grab a capo, this will help explain. So, it may not sound great, but it'll help explain. So if I just put a capo right here on the 7th fret, oh, come on, I just want to do it so that the strings line up nicely. There we go. So we've got a capo here, and I just play an A minor chord, okay? The 4 chord in the key of A minor, and if I want to play the 5 chord, that's an E minor chord in the key of A minor, but because I'm playing here, I think I'm going to make this a lot simpler here. I'm just fretting an A minor chord. Sorry for the out of tune. It's not an A minor chord, but the shape is an A minor. In the key of A minor, if I play a D minor chord, well, that's always the 4 chord, right? So here is a 1-4 progression, and here's the 5 chord. And all of these shapes work in open position. In the key of A minor, D minor, and E minor make 1, 4, and 5. Now that I've moved up here, and I'm using this A minor shape as my 1 chord, or I'm in the key of E minor, because when I play an A minor shape, it's actually fretting E, G, and B, right? So here is my E minor scale. And when I play the 4 chord, which I'll just put in blue here, the 4 chord makes a D minor shape in this area, just like it does in open position, because a 1-4 progression using an A minor will always be a D minor shape. So when I'm soloing over a 1-4 progression in this zone, right in this area of the map, I'm starting with my pentatonic scale as like the basic framework, but then I'm gonna mess around with that scale. I'm gonna mess around with that scale. I'm I'm going to mess around with that scale to emphasize notes that are actually in the chord. And if we're using like an A minor shape as the one chord, a D minor shape will always be the 4-chord shape, and I don't have to change positions. I just have to add notes to this pentatonic scale. E, G, B, oh, here we go. I'm looking at, where are we? Is that the pentatonic? So that's the pentatonic scale, and I just need to add notes and focus on the actual chord shape. But I have a lot of lessons about this kind of thing on my Patreon as well, and it's called Caged Soloing is the series I have on Patreon, and sorry for all the red notes there. Part of the reason why I made a whole series about it is because it's hard to explain simply in a few minutes on a live stream. But let's keep going through a few more questions here, and then I'm gonna probably have to call it a day. So let's see, what do we have here? Do you find drums first, then guitar, then bass is best order to compose? Jimmy, it really all depends. Sometimes I'll have a guitar idea first and I'll record that. Sometimes I'll have a bass line idea. Sometimes I'll get a melody idea. It really all depends. And it turns out if you write with a different instrument first, the final product ends up different. So sometimes I'll deliberately write guitar first to try to have a more guitar-driven song. Sometimes I'll write drums first to have a more groove-written song, or a bass line to make it that kind of vibe. Searching for Pixels says, any special Patreon voucher codes for your live watchers? No, but for everyone, you get a free 7-day trial. You can get access to my whole Patreon and check it out, see how you like it. On Thursday this week, I will be doing a live Q&A just like this, except to a lot fewer people, so you can ask a lot more questions if you want. Yeah, cool. Thanks for not writing jokes. I appreciate it. Edu Totola says, glad you restarted posting videos. Probably 500 views in your cage system are mine. Nice. How much is your Patreon? It is $11.67 a month, basically $12 a month. I've thought about raising the price, but for now, that's what it is. Yeah, so cool. Thanks everyone for hanging out today. I think that I'm gonna call it a day. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun, and I'll see y'all later. Have a good rest of your whatever you're doing. Peace out.